my thanks also to all organisers and participants. It's great to join another timely CEP discussion on this sensitive and important issue. I'm proud to have taken part in a series of excellent CEP webinars on the Houthis, always with my good friends Ari and Hans. And of course, Hans was quite right to direct anyone who's interested to look on the CEP website and to find both recordings of the former webinars. You'll see me there, Hans there, and Ari there. And also, of course, perhaps even more importantly, the underlying reports that Ari has largely written himself. One of the most interesting of all of those reports was the one that Hans just referred to, and that was on the Houthis diverting and subverting the purpose of humanitarian assistance to the Yemeni people. And I want to revisit that paper in the briefest of outline now, and set it in the context of Ari's more recent findings on Somalia. Now, Hans will speak after me, focusing on how some of the concerns that we have raised with regard to Somalia and Yemen had already been noted by the Counter-Extremism Project in the context of Afghanistan. And of course, there are similarities and differences, just as there are similarities and differences between al-Shabaab, the Houthis, and the Taliban, if you like, the three bad actors involved in making humanitarian delivery both necessary and problematic in these countries. What those three terrorist groups share is a virulent hostility to Western-style democracies, from where most aid donations come. They also share a contempt for the United Nations and the wider international community, whom they expect to be able to bully to get their way. They share a lack of concern for the welfare of their fellow citizens, whom they hold hostage to starvation and effectively blackmail the international community to meet their conditions for allowing relief to reach them. In other words, the weaponization of distress. And then they share the sophistication and the cynicism to understand and manipulate the politics and processes of their adversaries. And this is a really important point, because these are, as well as being violent, dangerous, cruel organizations, they are sophisticated. They know how to understand UN process. They know what's said in UN committees. And if you are a Western leader who uses Twitter, they will follow you and they will see what you say, and they will draw conclusions from what you say. Turning to the humanitarian community, and this is echoing some points that Ari has made, it doesn't welcome close scrutiny, and it expects the Western public, who are stakeholders in humanitarian delivery because their taxes are being spent. It expects them simply to take it on trust that the humanitarian community is doing good, and not just doing good, but doing it as efficiently and conscientiously as possible. But as Ari has said, we're talking about large amounts of money, large amounts of taxpayers' money, and it isn't good enough to have 5 years pass without reviewing an audit that revealed problems. You simply have to be serious about this. Now, in their Yemen study, Ari, and at that time he co-wrote the Yemen study with Nathaniel, his friend and colleague, and they were admirably measured in their analysis and recommendations. Like me and like Hans, they don't want to see humanitarian delivery halted. We want to see it reach its intended recipients, people in urgent need. But our worry is that the failure of humanitarians to do due diligence, or to call out interference, or to welcome scrutiny, may discredit the entire enterprise. The failure of member states like the United Kingdom to be more scientific, transparent, and honest in evaluation of aid delivery is equally troubling. And I don't exonerate myself in this. I was British ambassador to Yemen from 2015 to 2017, and I witnessed this failure, and I didn't do enough to call it out. Like many humanitarians, the UK aid community was more concerned with ticking boxes and using up their budgets so that those budgets would not be cut in subsequent years. The metrics that we had at that time emphasized delivery, but as was made clear in the CEP Houthi report, it was not verified delivery to those in acute need. Audit depended upon local implementation partners, IPs, and third-party monitors, TPMs, who were in some cases not directly known to any UK aid official. We should have done more to highlight the obvious risks flowing from this. ARI has identified issues about methods of assistance, such as cash-based transfers, CBTs, and voucher systems. And Hans has very helpfully clarified those mechanisms for people listening who are not directly familiar with them. Now, those systems are administratively easy and they're scalable. They can be done, you can easily double or quadruple those kind of systems with minimal additional overhead for delivery. But of course, those systems are also easy for malign actors to game for the purposes of diversion. I share ARI's concerns, and I wonder about a certain laziness in defaulting to the easy but deceptive delivery metrics that these mechanisms offer. I know so many wonderful humanitarians who embrace the hard work and physical risk of delivery on the ground, establishing schools, digging wells, all of those activities. Some of the best people I've ever worked with have been humanitarian delivery officials, and also military and special forces officers. And there's an interesting overlap between the two because both are incredibly robust, tough people getting involved in difficult situations for ideological reasons, to make a difference, to make things better. And CEP has the greatest regard for genuine, targeted, verified humanitarian delivery. I mean, this is real delivery at the sharp end. The benefit to needy recipients of a school or a well, for example, is never in doubt. But this does not appear to be the direction of travel for most large budget aid operations. Let me also say just a few words about acute need. It's a bugbear of mine that's very slightly off the subject of the report. My experience at the United Nations was that the UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, was remarkably and unacceptably thin-skinned about any kind of criticism or any kind of suggestion that it required more due diligence, more devoting of resources to ensuring that there was no aid diversion. There was almost an element of evading scrutiny or accountability and sort of blustering and bullying to avoid it. The approach was to insist that humanitarian delivery trumped all other concerns in all cases without exception. And that to suggest otherwise, to suggest that there were other issues that needed to be considered, was to want people to starve. OCHA showed nothing but contempt for the Security Council's concerns about terror finance risks from aid delivery in places like Afghanistan, Somalia, and Yemen. Now, famine is a terrible thing, and it happens, and it is one of the most dreadful things that we have ever had to deal with over the decades where it has occurred because of war, because of conflict, because of drought, or other factors. But OCHA is like the boy who cried wolf. During my time working on Yemen, we were told that it was the world's most acute humanitarian crisis, and that any number up to half of the entire population of the country was about to starve to death. And needless to say, nothing of the kind ever happened. But the UN went on to make similarly extravagant claims in Afghanistan. In other words, it was being used as a way of whipping up alarm to justify the contribution of governments to the budget, the aid budget that would enable these humanitarian operations to work. The problem with that, of course, is that if you do this again and again, people notice, and they notice they're being told something that is not consistent with what they were being told before, and they start to lose confidence in your metrics. I regularly mention something that the United Nations Secretary General said, it was early this year, when he published a bizarre social media post during the current Middle East crisis, saying that, and I quote, 3 out of 4 of the hungriest people in the world are in Gaza. Now, if you'll do the mathematics on this, it won't take you more than a moment to see that it amounts to a claim that the number of people starving in the world, and that includes Yemen, it includes Sudan, it includes Afghanistan, and it includes many other places where there is famine or acute food insecurity. That total number, everywhere else in the world, cannot amount to more than 1/3 of the population of Gaza. Now, this is statistical illiteracy and cynical melodrama, and it causes donor fatigue. It also links to an argument that needs to be had, however painful, about whether tyrannies like the Houthis and the Taliban, and indeed Hamas, have learned to game the international community in such a way as to prop up their repellent regimes. Are Western taxpayers effectively underwriting the finances of groups who intend us harm? I will finish with a few words about the outrageous Houthi terrorism against civilian vessels in the Red Sea, on the pretext of solidarity with Palestine. They evidently think so little of the importance of humanitarian delivery that they have made maritime access to all Red Sea ports, including the port of Hodeidah, unsafe. This callous disregard for the welfare of the Yemeni people also extends to arresting and abusing aid workers. In dealing with the Houthis, the re-establishment of deterrence must be our priority. Until the Houthis stand down from their current illegal campaign, there can be no progress towards the unbalanced peace that the United Nations are misguidedly pursuing in their favour. And we should review the extent to which humanitarian assistance can reach areas of Houthi control via ports controlled by the government of Yemen. This is the opportunity for Western policymakers to review the findings and recommendations of Ari's and Nathaniel's paper and insist on a new paradigm for humanitarian assistance for Yemen. Anyway, enough on Yemen for now. Thank you very much for your attention. I will, of course, be delighted to address any questions you may have in the time remaining after Hans's intervention.